So, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so this is a corporate section, so we're all wearing jackets and trying to be very extra professional.
That's right.
So one of the things, before we get into it, I think when we talk about like new things, innovation, I always like to do like a level set. And for me, innovation and the new stuff is about making something new or finding a new way to do things, all in the service of creating value. And sometimes value is pure dollars, and sometimes value is lots of other things. Usually it's a combination. But I think as we get sort of settled into this kind of conversation, you heard the flip side of it before, like Jennifer said. For you guys and your roles, I'd love to know what you do here, other than just obviously sit on piles of corporate money, just ready to give it out to all these startups. What you do, but then how your company views the new, how your company views innovation. All right, Brian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Brian with Gentex Corporation. What I do there is I'm a director of corporate development, so we spend a lot of time doing a lot of scouting. We go through a lot of filter process to try to go through deal flows quickly, things that fit into what our targets are for innovation and technology, usually early stage. And then we look to try to do, whether it's a partnership, an investment, a licensing agreement, or an M&A arrangement. That's what we're after. So,
Excellent, thanks. Dom?
Hi, everyone. So Dominic Daunter, Global Design, Innovation, and Sustainability Director at Haworth. So been there about 11 years. Was in the consulting world before that. For Haworth, innovation is the ability to conceive, develop, deliver products, processes, services, and potentially new business models that create value for customers. And we talk about that from the perspective of performance and desire. Really, I mean, again, being in the furniture industry, we're thinking about comfort, we're thinking about usability, and in the typical human-centered design process, you're probably all familiar with desirability, viability, and feasibility. And so that's how we kind of evaluate, different ideas that come to us, whether it's a technology, whether it's a product, and then we go through a whole scoring process that helps us understand how that gets integrated into our pipeline. And we do that through internal processes and people. We do that with external partners, and those partners could be suppliers, they could be external designers, and they could be startups.
Excellent. Well, that's a pretty good starting point. Pretty small jobs, easy stuff to do. You guys have a lot of extra time. So we heard in the last panel with Mike and the team talking about the perception of corporate. And I think when we've all worked in corporate, you guys are there right now, what do you think the biggest misconceptions of your worlds are? If you're sitting out here, if you're in this crew out here and you're an early stage company or a startup, or you think you have an idea, what do they think? What do you think they're thinking of you? Like, it's just easy. We've got money, that kind of stuff. I'm curious. Jump in.
I think, you heard some great examples on that last panel, and unfortunately, I think that reputation is well earned in a lot of cases. We could go around the room and poll how many times someone's gotten burned, or you get a really hot interaction, and then all of a sudden you get put on ice for 6-7 months, and how disruptive that is to a young company at any stage of the process is very disruptive, and I think that happens a lot of times. So I think really the key is understanding that I look at my career in my lifetime. It's been built on how do you mitigate risk at every step. Whether it was being in the government, whether in the military, whether it was time I've spent in large corporations, everything you do is designed to avoid risk or at least minimize the downside at every turn. You turn around and you meet somebody like yourself that's an entrepreneur or someone that's a startup that, you live and breathe risk. You need that as much as you need oxygen. We're coming at this thing from two very different ends of the spectrum. And I think oftentimes that conflict, just in mentality, is really one of the most limiting factors for the development of successful relationship. So getting over that language barrier, getting over the thesis of what we're basing things off of is pretty key. And then I think the last thing I'll say is just around the financing and the funding portion of that. You have the luxury of being a large organization, so you've got a healthy balance sheet. But with that it comes with a lot of measurements and a lot of KPIs and a lot of expectations. And I think that's oftentimes it ends up moving at a glacier pace compared to what you're used to being able to run at within your own organization.
Yeah, I think it was Tim in the last segment saying, I'm used to working at, or Tyler, I think it was you, saying from Tuesday to Tuesday, this week to next week, and all of a sudden I've got a thing. And the worlds that we've come from, it might be a year or 2 years or more. Dom, what's the misconceptions in your world? What do you think?
I was actually going to use Tyler's example too. So I think there's definitely truth to that. And it's about, from our perspective, about being transparent about the process, about communicating what the journey is going to be like, and communicate with integrity. Right now our pipeline is, we have a 5-year roadmap. So we have all the R&D dollars and all the resources aligned to deliver on that roadmap. So when a new idea comes in, it's like, hey, we've got this new solution. How do we fit it into the plan? And what's going to shuffle in the plan? And how does that impact our financial linkage? I'm sure Gentex does all that same work, right? And so it's understanding, and when we were talking about this, I use this example, it's kind of like swimming alongside the Titanic, right? Changing the direction of the ship is slow and painful, but once the ship is behind you, it's pretty hard to stop, right? I mean, we've got over 300 dealers worldwide. We've got a massive distribution model and system set up, so we can help organizations be very successful. We're not going to do the Tuesday to Tuesday thing. That's not going to happen, right? But we can find a happy medium in there somewhere.
Wait, are you saying that every large company is like the Titanic and is going to sink eventually? Anyways, so let's talk a little bit more about, you're both in roles where you're constantly working with teams and evaluating opportunities that are coming at you. We're gonna get into how those opportunities arrive at you in a little bit, but I'm curious, how are you measured? Like, what are some of those KPIs, Brian? Like, what's the company and your leadership and your peers looking at from you? What are their expectations? You're bringing a great deal every week. They're finding a technology that's going to fill the 5-year pipeline forever. What does it look like?
Yeah, for me personally, Gentex has been looking to try to establish more positions on multiple markets. So, if you know Gentex, or if you're from the area, you always associate it with automotive supplier or car parts. Doesn't sound sexy, it's not exciting, but they've got other businesses that they run in. I moved up here from North Carolina because of background in medical device, right? So we've got a huge interest in establishing a position in medical. So when we look at deal flows, or I'm looking at technologies or new startup companies, it's how does that investment lock itself into a position where we can start generating revenue, hopefully down the road, is the game plan there. And I think the patience that are involved with trying to start up a new market for an established publicly traded company it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of understanding in what we're looking for, and then it takes a lot of the resources. And I think it was Tyler that gave the example on the last panel where you do get invested in by a company. And they partner up, but then maybe things change, and then all of a sudden you find yourself way in the back of the line, looking to try to re-engage or get resources. So we've tried to avoid that situation by when we partner up with the company, it's usually an investment. We try to get in early, post-seed, somewhere around Series A is always a nice spot for us, and we take an equity position with a cash investment or in-kind services, because that really gives us, sort of to his point, last thing we want to do is turn on a dime or all of a sudden abandon a strategy and leave that company now in an awkward position with their cap table. So we really try to take all those into account. We are very thorough on the front end of that process intentionally, because once we are invested, we're committed for the follow-on rounds and the fundings, and we really try to position ourselves as an active strategic partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Dom, any builds there?
Yeah, so we have a visual wall, and we're tracking everything from the funnel fill to 2 years after any product or business is launched. And then we track all the different stages there. And really, I'd say there's 2 primary stages related to this conversation. One is the funnel fill side, and we have a scorecard. There's 5 categories: strategic fit, core competencies, competitive advantages, and a couple others. Of course, the last one is financial return. We do all the math related to that, evaluate the 50 or 60 ideas that are in the funnel, and then of course the funnel gets narrowed down based on how that scorecard plays out. It all equates to estimated commercial value, right? What are we going to invest, and what's the return going to be for us and our partner? And then on the other end of it, we measure vitality. So how is our portfolio performing relative to the products we've launched? Because we want a certain amount of our portfolio generating revenue relative to the products that have been launched in the last 5 years, right? That helps to ensure that our portfolio and our business is staying fresh to a certain extent. So I would say those are the two most relevant to this discussion. Of course, finance has 50 other measures at all the different stages, but those are the two big ones.
So when I was leading front-end innovation in corporate, a lot of people said that I had a really cushy job, which was my peers in the company, which was kind of interesting. They're like, it's super fun. You just think of ideas, you meet with people, you go to stuff like this. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually really hard. Like, this is a hard job. Tell me a little bit about like those misperceptions of your roles and the teams that you're responsible for within your own company. I'm curious, like, skepticism, do people feel threatened? Tell me about it. Curious, to the degree that you're willing to share. Right? And then I'll ask you again until you share.
Okay, I'll jump in. So, like I said, I moved here. I'm not from West Michigan. I've never been to Michigan even for a connecting flight up until 8 years ago. So I've been here now 8 years, and so I got a little bit of an accent. I don't have a lot of friends in the area when I first start, and we had never had a business development or corporate.
Where are your friends, Brian?
Okay, I'm in a safe place here, so I'll share. But kind of coming into an organization that was really optimized and really running on all cylinders for high volume manufacturing in automotive, and then coming in with no automotive experience and this healthcare background I was sus, man. I was suspect from the beginning. It was really trying to ice skate uphill in a lot of ways to win folks over internally. Especially when I started down an avenue and our team started building, and then we started pulling in investments in these new startup companies that are requiring resources. So I think about, all of a sudden now I'm not just this weird little side act over here in a side office. Now you're starting to pull real resources from, paying customers, large OEM automotive positions into a startup that they don't even have a product yet. It's still early stage tech. And it has been a challenge, and a lot of that is cultural, and it's not because people are against innovation or they're against the idea. It's really around communication, and I think what we've found to be very successful, just especially in the last 4 or 5 years, was hitting this head on. So we've got 6,400 employees. I've made it a point to kind of go on this internal road trip internally within the company, and I'd be at stand-up meetings. I'd be at department engineering services meetings where you got a room full of 100, 200 folks, and you just try to walk them through a little bit around the medical strategy, what is business development or corporate development, and why do we have a need to do it. And it's not a luxury; it's a need. When your product is an inside or a side view mirror for automotive, and really trying to push some of the urgency around it. And I think as people start understanding the bigger scope of it, you slowly have some converts. You get some folks who started pulling people onto dedicated teams. They enjoy the opportunity, something totally different, and then trying to build off of those small wins. So,
Excellent. That's good. So small wins. And managing expectations, but also just bringing as many people along the journey as you could, right? Yeah. Okay, so Dom, how do you do it?
Yeah, so I'd say it's similar. It's communication and culture, and I'd say it's from the perspective of managing risk and communicating about risk. And then from the communication perspective, it's talking to our 8,000 members worldwide around how strategy or these opportunities translate to action for them. So how is it going to influence, their function, their skill set, what they're doing in the company, whether it's innovation related, a product design related, sustainability related. What does it mean to them, and how does it change how they should be doing their job on a day-to-day basis? And so we're very purposeful about, internal email blasts, about newsletters, and then about doing circuits on all-hands meetings like Brian was talking about.
So it was one of my last trips before COVID hit and shut down. I moderated what I think was actually an argument between a VP of marketing and a VP of R&D for one of the biggest brands. It was about a little over $1 billion within our portfolio. And the R&D person was shouting essentially at the marketing person saying, you never tell us what you want us to go find. And the marketing person was shouting at the R&D going, you never tell us what you have. And it was a really interesting moment where you're like, oh, it's about communication and managing, like, hey, we found this thing that we think could be really interesting, feasibility, desirability, viability, right? And the other side going, we think we found a need and we're trying to figure out a thing. So you guys sit right in between that, right? And so how are you finding the stuff that you're investing in? Are you just constantly going to CES and stuff like this and wandering? Are people blowing up your LinkedIn? They will after this, I'm sure, so that's great. Look forward to that. How are you like finding the deals that you're even starting to evaluate? Like not even getting through the filter process, just filling the front side of that funnel. Where are those coming from?
Yeah, so again, we have 8,000 members worldwide, so we're always getting ideas from the members, particularly our field sales teams, right? Because they're all over the place, they go to different events and they share information with us, or some of those potential partners are customers, right? They're a startup, they're trying to furnish a space, we're trying to give them a good deal, and then, oh, by the way, they want to meet someone in the organization because there's a potential collaboration opportunity. I'd say the other avenues are, we are very purposeful about, we have 30 people in the research and design group and about 20 people in the sustainability team. We're really purposeful about making sure the team gets out and goes to different industry events, not only ours within the furniture industry, but in the tech industry and everything else, just to understand where those cross-pollination opportunities are. So we're always doing our own scouting, and then we've worked with great organizations like Seamless. I know a few of the folks are here today, which has been great. And like we were talking about before, you all can move a lot faster than we can. We couldn't keep up with all the great ideas that were coming at us. So how do we leverage that and make sure that we're making the right bets at the right time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brian, any builds?
Yeah, I think once we had the business development team sort of organized, the very next step we did was partner up with advanced R&D. We've got a small team. There's maybe 4 or 5 folks. Zach's here. Actually, he leads that.
Zach.
And yeah, big shout out to Zach. So anyway, it's really right-hand man teamwork on how we kind of approach these. We provide the strategy, and then his team basically is able to go out and they do the same thing. They go outside of industry, but they're really looking at core tech, and they're able to do a number of, they come back with a list of interesting companies. We'll dive through those, think about applications, and one of the fun parts with corporate, we kind of get that luxury is when we look at a company or especially at core technology, it may be very different than what the founder or the entrepreneur is thinking in his mind or her mind as far as what the application or the market's going to be. So with Zach's team, they're able to look at this and think of it not so much vertically but horizontally. Is this a platform technology that we can run across multiple verticals? And then that gives us more to chew on because we've got the automotive and aerospace and fire protection and now medical. So now if it can cover one or more of those verticals, now it's really interesting. So we've done the plug and play membership piece. Nothing bad to say about it. It's just so big and so expensive. Unless you're paying for platinum membership, you're somewhere way down the feed and trough. By the time I see the deal, it's been reviewed by 10,000 other companies, and we just didn't see a lot of value in that. But we've also been a member of Seamless for quite some time. So Matt and Mike have been incredible to work with. So
excellent. So interesting. Like, let's talk a little bit more about kind of the filtering process. So you've found these, right? You're starting to, the Zachs of the world have kind of narrowed it already. They've seen a thing. You've started to see what you could potentially do. What are some of the other ways you're starting to vet that down the funnel process? I mean, it takes time for sure. We know that, but obviously you're looking for some numbers, but what else are you looking at to kind of help narrow your scope in? That's tough. That's one of the hardest things to do, it would seem to me.
For us, we do a lot of work and have a lot of conversations around values, integrity, and just culture alignment, right? Is it going to be a good mesh with the rest of the organization, or is there going to be, conflict? And that's just getting the executive teams in the room, doing some dinners, making sure that, there's that family feel, right? And we do an acquisition or investment probably 1 or 2 a year. So we're very purposeful about driving growth, through this model. And we've been pretty successful at it over the years.
So the relational side, as much as the technology, the product's super interesting, you could see what you could do with it. And
Like you
obviously
said, the
there's-
math has to work.
The math has to work, of course, but you've got to make sure you're able to be on the plane together, right, for a little while.
Your family.
Your family, love it or hate it, right?
Right.
We all have those family members, so
Right.
I think I do. But anyways, Brian, any builds on your filtering process?
No, I would say our biggest lesson has really been around taking the time on the leadership side of a startup or a young company. That's oftentimes almost more important, because what we've found is whether it's coming out of academia and it's a professor, whether it's someone that's been through 10 startups already and successfully exited a few, or if it's their first time, there are a lot of types of personalities, and some folks just don't want to hear anyone's feedback or input. And you have seen this thing just Thelma and Louise right off of a cliff that really could have been successful if they could have opened themselves up for maybe different ways to do a deal, or the equity positions that they were willing to give up. There's some folks just cling to it, and I get it. It's scary. It's their first time, especially when they're engaging with the corporate. They think that we are the big bad wolf a lot of times. And you're operating from that position. So coming at this and with your hand on your wallet, thinking that we're there to pick it it's a tough place to start, but it kind of goes back. That's why the relationship piece is so important for us, is making sure that there is a trust. And I think that's been one of the biggest lessons for me personally, is just appreciating where folks are coming from that are just wired so differently than I am.
Yeah. So Brian, you mentioned a little bit ago about what I have always called adjacent thinkers, the ones that can see a thing and see what else it could be. And I think we heard Tyler with Bitfarm saying, we thought we were going to be here, and actually the market was over here. And startup world, we always talk about pivots and things like that. What you're talking about is broader than that, is seeing potential. So for the founder in the room that's I can only see the thing that I can make, how would you, other than you've got to make time to explore the other options, that seems like a critical piece to be working with a bigger company like you guys to say, okay, you could also do this with it, to not hold it so tightly. It's easy for me to say that. What would you say to them, how to not hold it tightly enough so that you can explore what else you could do with it? I didn't give you that question ahead of time, so good luck.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think about what a typical week looks like, and I've been surprised how much time I've spent as sort of a player coach alongside a lot of the startups that we've invested in. And it's been very interesting to me to think about, it's a lonely role that you take on as a founder or a CEO of a company. And I think most people don't appreciate the lonely factor to that, because if you're fortunate enough to have a few staff, let's say you get up to 5 or 10 employees, you're balancing how much do you share with your team versus how much do you got to kind of keep behind closed doors, so they don't panic and freak out that you're 6 days from not making payroll, and if this check doesn't come from big corporate or your next investor, those are things you don't necessarily want to share and generate panic. So, what we've kind of what we work towards at least, and I can say this, I think about what I'm most proud of. I think there's 6 or 7 companies that are in our portfolio that I get a call from these guys at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday, and they're in full freak out mode, and they're like, hey B, this is what the situation is, blah blah blah, and we're able to kind of just talk it through together and coach on it. So I think just those opportunities where you can find them to really bring added value is just that's been a really fun part of my role. I think that's not common. So
That's good. Dom, same question. How do you help a founder see the other things that they could do with this thing? It's time and access for one player coach for sure. Any other tools that you would recommend?
No, I mean, part of that relationship building and onboarding journey is reviewing their business plan and then building it together on what we think it could be as part of the Haworth family. So we do it together because there's got to be mutual benefit, but mutual buy-in to what that journey looks like. And that's done, again, with all the executives in the room, so everyone's aligned. You hear, our CEO's perspective, their, founders or CEO's perspective, to make sure that alignment's there. because you have to have that high level buy-in. Because if you're not connected, it's going to be hard to be successful down the road.
Excellent. So let's talk about some failures for a second. To the degree that you want to share, you don't have to be super specific, but we'll end on like some of the wins. But this, I mean, hypothetically, this doesn't work great all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it blows up, something happens, the chemistry you thought is there isn't there, the technology you thought is there isn't as locked up on the IP side as you thought. Maybe even to use a term that Sean uses, like sometimes we just have to bank the technology and stick it over here and let it marinate for a little while. And it's just not ready yet. How do you, like, what are some of those moments either where you hit pause and hope that the market catches up, or it just blew up in your face? What happened? Tell us. Share us your failures.
I've probably got 2 examples. I look at the
They're sitting right over there?
technology. Yeah,
Awesome.
they're over here. Right? So, yeah, I won't get overly specific, but there was a company, we were putting a deal together. It was probably about 4 years ago. We had been working with them for about 6 months, made numerous trips out to visit them, and we were, I thought, a week or 2 away from signing an agreement. And the 2 CEOs ended up, on this last trip, just talking more and realizing that they're not as connected as they thought they were going to be. And so, after the 6 months, we decided it just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah.
And it's better to catch it then than to, have everyone sign and then find out, it's just not the best opportunity. So, and there were a lot of reasons why that happened. But it's disappointing because we had all invested a lot of time and energy and, a lot of travel time to get to that point. Mm-hmm. I'd say one other example, you're talking about, kind of shelving technology, and I know there's folks in here that have heard me talking about this. I've been jumping up and down at Haworth about wireless power. If you know anything about it, it's basically power that can be distributed over Wi-Fi, and it can charge your phone, run your TV, do all kinds of stuff. They're saying, in 3 or 4 years, well, I guess 4 years from now, so 2028, you can basically run everything in your house without having any electrical wires, except for your fridge, your air conditioner, and your electric dryer. And it's like, guys, we should be paying attention to this because this is going to paradigm shift how people plan space in a building. And so what does that mean to our industry, let alone our business? And so again, it's something on our horizon. Why aren't we playing with it now, engaging these organizations, and trying to do something there? So, it's not there yet. And of course, utility development like that takes 10 to 20 years to really have dramatic impact. But we can see it's coming, so let's get prepared. Mm-hmm.
So I hear you saying, and I resonate deeply from my experience too, is like, they don't always listen to us.
Right.
Like the people that we work for don't always listen to the obvious ideas that are there. And so it's about storytelling, and that's where we might have to lean on the startups to help craft that story to make a win for everybody. Right. Which I think is just kind of an interesting, it's one of those empathy building things we've got to realize. I remember we launched a lot of consumer products, and sometimes the marketing teams would be like, well, this one startup is like, they launched it so quickly, and we're like, yeah, it's the only thing that they're working on. That's their one thing, and they have to get it right. We have 58,000 things, and we don't need them all to be right now. And so there's this empathy. We had to help people understand that balance. Brian, failures on your side?
Yeah, I got a great one. This was just like started as a straight up failure.
Okay, great.
Broke our own rule, which was,
Excellent.
you always invest in the founder, and the person is one of the most important pieces. We let a technology and an opportunity kind of supersede what our gut feeling was about this individual, the CEO, and we went ahead and invested. And right after taking a large position on the company, the CEO kind of just really showed himself. He was just showing out. It was exactly what we were afraid of, and kind of went a little sideways.
Validated why you had the value in the first place.
Yes,
right?
and that's why we had the rule, and we broke it. So the board ended up pushing the CEO out of the company, and then our risk. Obviously the investment's at risk, the company's at risk. It was already on a sort of a wafer thin budget, and we started trying to figure out what to do with it, and it actually led to this pretty cool opportunity. I got a chance to step in, and I think a lot where my empathy that I've learned instead of being on the corporate side, but I got a chance to play as this interim CEO for a small company for about 13 months. Wow. And it was up in Toronto. And I, for the first time ever, I've only been on this side. So sitting on that side, it was like you're airdropped in, and all of a sudden now I'm the one calling and trying to get someone to answer when, I was a week away from not making payroll. And it has changed I'm a change man. I promise y'all, I will never treat startups the same way again, in a very positive way. I mean that, and it just gave me so much more respect. I think having lived that life, and I know I had the safety net of I was still with the corporate, but living and breathing that life with those folks in that company for 13 months was just a life-changing moment, and actually it ended up as a good story. Because we actually ended up acquiring that company just this past November, and it's Eastside. It's the booth that we have back in the back of the room, designed to help with low vision individuals. So really glad it turned out great, but nightmare on the front end. It was very much a failure.
So I think, the red thread through this for me in a lot of ways is about empathy. In that it always comes back to that in the work that we all do, but the reality is the worlds of corporate are very different. And the worlds of startup are really different, and that's okay. We're not trying to make them the same, but you do have to start to take a step towards each other to realize, like, your world's not as easy as we might assume it is. Your worlds are complicated, but why can't you just deliver the thing and see the opportunities that we all see with it? So that's the challenge. All right, so you started Bridge into your success, but Dom, any amazing successes? You're like, this is the way it's supposed to work. This is why I keep coming to my job every day.
Oh, lots of successes.
Don't be too humble with that. Right?
No, we're fortunate that we're privately held and that the family, is very invested in the company and the community. We started a company called Bluescape 15 years ago. If you're familiar with Miro, it's similar to that. It's a many-to-many collaboration tool. And quite honestly, we don't have any business starting a technology company. So it's an oversized iPad, 100 people can be on different, screens, all collaborating, sketching and stuff at the same time. Super cool. Developed the company, we sold it, about a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, so not too long ago, but that was a huge commitment. The company continued to invest in it and develop it, and it was, a major success for the organization. We're very purposeful about, scouting for new designers all the time, from externals, different parts of the world. Signed a royalty agreement with a designer in Italy this morning. So we're always looking for new partners. And I think we have a good process and a good cadence of being able to deliver on that.
So I know we've got some service providers and some corporate folks in the room that may be dancing into this space. It's scary. It takes investment and commitment on lots of levels. It takes leadership on lots of levels. It takes the willingness to experiment a bit. What are some of the baby steps or experiments that you would give to another kind of corporate enterprise that wants to start to figure out how to work with a smaller early stage company or technology?
Yeah, thinking about there's a company that I was with before in Carolina, and their approach, they had no budget to do this, but they knew that they needed a better pipeline for innovation, and it was a 100-year-old company. They had been doing med device for a large part of that time, and they were desperate for new blood and new ways to do it, and what we started doing was, instead of trying to hire or try to outsource it, we looked at the team internally. We had 700 manufacturing folks with us, and kind of going through the group at all stand up, we started asking who had innovative ideas, and kind of a bootstrap kind of process. We did a skunkworks thing. I had everybody submit some ideas for whether it was a new product line, whether it was a new process. And it was kind of a good way to, you kind of learn without spending any dollars. I mean, the only expense we had was the hourly rates that we pulled these folks offline for a week at a time. And we did some Six Sigma training with them, and we did some, most of them had not, most of them was high school education was the extent of it. But my point is that what we were able to show through this, over 1 year, we did 9 cycles with folks, and really starting internally at a very basic level. It started getting a little bit of momentum, and then once we started applying those new process steps within the manufacturing sites, then it was able to start building a bit of a business case to show to general management or executives to say, this is what we're doing on zero budget. Can you imagine if we were more intentional about this and started looking at partnering with some of these other tech companies around the space?
Excellent. So just get started.
Wherever you're at, yeah.
Move off from the investment you're making is moving people's focus, which there's a cost to, but you have team.
Sure.
Start to explore. Just start. Just try it, right?
What's the cost of not doing it is the better question. You get burnout. You get folks that just get numb to it. Yeah. And the worst thing you can have with an employee is when they stop talking to you. And we were really at that stage of trying to re-engage with the company and get the folks to trust you again.
Yeah. Dominic, what would you say to a company trying to get started into this space, or somebody's telling them that they should?
Right.
What do they do?
Yeah, I'd add just to Brian's part of the story is it's executive level engagement, right? In the decision making, the process, governing the funnel, quite honestly, and how you make the decisions on where you're going to place your bets and where you're not going to place your bets. And I think, quite honestly, where you're not going to place your bets is the harder and more important discussion to have. We know we can't develop all the products that we need to have on an annual basis to have the growth, deliver the financial linkage that we're planning for ourselves. So we have to do it through relationships, partnerships, acquisitions, investments. So it's just making sure that the executive team is behind where we're going to take some risk and where we're going to place our bets, and then what's not going to happen because we're investing dollars and resources into these other opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I, in my work, I often talk about the short long and the long short, and I think sometimes from a startup or early stage perspective, we're like, we gotta just get to the next 6 days. We gotta if we can just get this one meeting, if we can just do that, and we'll figure everything out. My experience on the corporate side is a little bit more on the long short, like good companies, strong companies, smart teams that make choices take a long time. But then as soon as they decide, they are actually able to move relatively quickly a lot of the time. And I think that's the thing is if you're a startup, kind of like, this might take a while to get where we want to get, but then we can actually potentially move pretty quickly in a lot of ways. It's scary, but I think that little flip is kind of an interesting one to wrestle with. Before we get to questions like closing thoughts, maybe I actually got one more question for you. I didn't tell you this one either, but startups, early stage, you guys spend a lot of time working on your pitch, right? You gotta get the pitch. You got the CEO of Microsoft walking over to your booth in Eureka Park. It's CES. You got to get this dialed in. What do you wish when you've heard a lot of pitches? I'm sure. What do you wish they would just say faster?
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I look for the ask. I mean, what are you actually asking for? If you just want to make the connection to the network, that's fantastic.
Great.
Let's do that. If you're in a round, or you're trying to raise capital, let's just say that. How much is it? What's your valuation? How'd you come to that?
Yeah.
Be able to answer some of the basics kind of stuff, and
you don't need to know the exact type of wire that they picked to move this.
I glaze over because I'm just not I'm not that guy. But if you want to get through a great pitch, I think it's really just getting to the ask sooner. Yeah. I mean, that's really where it's at, and be very aware. I mean, we talk a lot about reality, living in reality, and not so much what it could have been or what it should have been. It's the how, not the how many. That's what we really want to get down to fairly quickly.
Yeah, cut to the chase. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Be bold to the degree, and then that opens the door for all the other conversation, right? That you want to have.
And the only thing I'd add to it, don't talk too much. Right? We just had a company here from Chicago probably a month ago, and the gentleman that was in the room pitching the company spoke almost solely for an hour and a half, going through PowerPoint slides. And it's like, you probably should have spoke for 15 minutes and then let the rest be conversation.
Buzzkill.
That's a rough one.
Yeah. So there's a delicate balance here. You have to read the room, right? So if the CEO of the company you're pitching starts playing with his phone or something, you better stop talking, right? And engage them and, have conversation. What are they thinking? What do they want? And how do drive the conversation to make sure they're more in tune with what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, so read the room and recognize you see a lot of PowerPoint slides and you sit in a lot of meetings, I'm sure. So it's just one more thing in a busy day, just like it's one more pitch in a busy day for a lot of you. So recognizing where you're both at, walking in there is kind of important. So we had a little conversation ahead of time. We're really curious the kind of questions that might come up here. So I'm curious, we'll start to just plant the seed. What do you want to know from whether representing the companies themselves, but more the perception or perspective of a enterprise leader that's kind of making some of these investments? What are you curious about? Audience? I got more questions. Oh, in the back. All right. Are you going to ask another IP question?
No.
No? Okay.
No, Devo. So if you have a supplier who is developing something and you've got two camps of people, you've got your designers and your engineers. You got camp innovation, and then you've got camp, bring it to market. Who does your developer favor?
Do we have an easier question to start with? That's a tough one. Camp innovation or camp get to market fast?
Yeah, I'm at Haworth, most of the opportunities come through the design and innovation group. And then we have the challenge, Jason was talking about how the marketing, you had the argument with the two people on stage. I mean, we're always arm wrestling, in the organization around, okay, where are the right risks? What are the right suppliers? What are the right materials? What are the right opportunities? And so we're really the evangelist for innovation. And it's part taking risk, and it's part driving change through the organization. And that's a journey. It's a fun journey at times, it's a painful journey at times, but I think that's really where it's really, we refer to it as the tip of the spear. Design, innovation, sustainability, we're all in, one functional group because we're really all trying to look 5 and 10 years out. The rest of the organization is more focused on, 24 months, maybe a little bit further, focused on P&L and delivering, results on a month-to-month basis. So we feel it's, kind of our role at Haworth to, drive those type of changes.
So you're kind of the interpreter between, or maybe translator is maybe a better word, of kind of the near-term thinking of business realities, we got to make this, and the far future. You got to kind of bring it in from Horizon 3 to from Horizon 1 to just kind of that 2 right there. You're kind of bridging that gap. So you're trying. Right. And sometimes we get it right, and
sometimes we're doing good.
Sometimes we get it wrong. But Ryan, how would you answer the same question? That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, but it leads to actually a different answer, which is kind of when you think about your investors, your cap tables. One of the things we've tried to work very hard on is as this strategic partner, we make it very clear up front. We're not a VC. We're not going to put that pressure on you to try to jump to market because we're looking at this as publicly traded. And we invest off balance sheet, by the way. It's not a fund or separately funded. It is truly off balance. So our position is if it takes another year and a half before it goes to market, but it's actually solving the real issue or it's getting the product to a better place for sustainability purposes and long-term revenue growth, we're all about that. We've got that luxury of the patience piece, and that's why we're trying to go lock an arm with the startup to be able to say like, hey, let's get this right the first time, and that's why we think that frankly we look at it and say we feel like our investment is it's a strong one. We're selective on it, but once we're in it, we'll try to protect and give you that runway to make sure you nail it on the first time.
Excellent. Other questions? Anybody got a burning question? Otherwise, I got a couple more I want to ask these guys. All right.
It's cocktail time.
I know we are right between cocktail time here.
I think it's time.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, sounds good.
So Jason, Brian, and Dominic, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I also want to mention this is Haworth Furniture as well, so thank you to Haworth for setting up with a nice stage, and thank you to Gentex for being our presenting sponsor. We're so grateful for you. So let's give them a round of applause.
Awesome.